Dr. Marion Sims, he was a scoundrel. Dr. Marion Sims tortured black women, enslaved black women, all for his benefit. He performed operations on them without anesthesia. So these surgical techniques that he perfected on these women made him famous. Heck, he was even known as the Father of Gynecology. Statues were erected in his honor all across the country. He even became the president of the American Medical Association. He was a personal doctor to an empress. Medical textbooks praised him for his prowess. They even consulted him when President Garfield got shot. This dude was a rock star, all on the backs of these enslaved women. So what about these enslaved women? Well, there were 11 of them, and we only know 3 of their names: Lucy, Anarcha, and Betsy. But until recently, they weren't even mentioned. They were not even a footnote in this story. Even medical books and medical journals that were slow to come around to the controversy over this guy's legacy. Not until recently was light shed on this. Instead, they continue to praise this guy without criticism. Quick break. If you like this video, if you like the content, if you like the way that I present it, hit the like button or subscribe. I'd definitely appreciate it. In a 1978 article in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they said that these women, they should have been grateful to him, and they would not have been able to tolerate all this pain had they not been slaves. What kind of bullshit is that? And in 2012, in the Annals of Surgery Journal, what did they say? They did acknowledge the controversy, but then they went on to defend him by saying this: the relief of pain was the major concern of the master and the bondsman, i.e. slave. Relief of pain. The master was worried about the slave's pain. That's weird. The master's worried about the slave's pain. Was he worried about the pain when he was whipping the shit out of them? Was he worried about the pain when he was raping one of these young ladies? Whoever wrote this article is an idiot. And then this medical article repeated what Sims had claimed, that they were willing to undergo these experiments. You believe that? But this is his side of the story. What about their side? We have no idea. I can guess. And if you're a slave, can you really consent? Do you have the right to say no? No, not if you want to leave intact. You have to remember, back in these days, practice of gynecology was basically non-existent. Dealing with the female genitalia? No, this was frowned upon by other physicians. They saw this as dirty, as beneath them. However, Sims, that scoundrel, he saw an opportunity. He saw an opportunity to become famous working on these fistulas, these vesicovaginal fistulas. So what exactly is this? What happens is there is prolonged pressure, prolonged contact between the vaginal wall and the bladder. Eventually what they'll do is form a hole or a conduit which connects the vagina to the bladder. So you can easily see the problem here. Once the bladder fills with urine, it's going to leak out of the vagina. However, for a long time, Sims's surgeries, repair of the fistula, they weren't successful. So how was he able to become so good at repairing these fistulas? Well, he had access to these women anytime he wanted. If he felt like doing the surgery, he'd just pull out one of the 11, put her on the table, and operate on her without anesthesia. They were essentially his property. They were his property. He temporarily took custody of these slaves. The original masters who had these quote-unquote faulty slaves, they'd bring these to him, and they'd work out a deal. So the original master would pay for clothing, pay for taxes, and in return, Sims agreed to operate on them and hopefully return them back intact so they could serve their duties again. And in his autobiography, The Story of My Life, he goes on to say, there was never a time that I could not, on any day, have a subject to operate on. Then he goes on to say this was the best time of my life. And make no mistake about it, he intended on profiting from perfecting these surgeries. And what about the slaves he operated on? They're a mere footnote in this story. At least they were. Up until recently, whenever they were mentioned in this story, they were portrayed as being lucky to have been operated on by Sims. Their fistula was cleared. What more could they want, right? But in the late 20th century, early 21st century, things began to change. Medical professionals and historians, they started to question this guy's ethics. They started to question the ethics of these experiments. The fact that he operated on these women without anesthesia when it was widely available. So these women who were being tortured over a 4-year period, they finally got the recognition that they deserved. So these women, who are these women? Not a whole lot is known about them. The only thing we know about them is what Sims put in his journal, and we certainly don't have their story. I wish we would have some record from at least one of these ladies, just to know what it was that they went through, what kind of torture they had to endure at this guy's hands, just so he could be praised and recognized. Turns out that Anarcha, one of the 3 that I mentioned earlier, over a 4-year period, she was operated on 30 times. Now, he's not doing repair of the fistula 30 different times. So what is he doing? Well, he was trying to perfect exactly how to close a surgical incision. So basically, he's learning how to stitch. What this tells me is that he cut on her, and then he stitched her up over and over and over again until he perfected it. And after a number of years of activism and protest, the statue of him in Philadelphia, it was moved into storage. And in 2018, the statue of him in New York, it was removed. It was replaced with a new plaque, a better plaque, a much improved plaque, one that actually told the real story, that told the story about these 11 women and what they sacrificed, and how their sacrifice enabled other women with these fistulas to benefit from, and how their bodies were used against their will without their consent to help the medical and scientific advancement of the repair of these fistulas, that told the real story of how Sims abused these ladies for his gain, whose bodies were used in the name of medical and scientific advancement, all without their consent. So finally, they're getting at least a little bit of the credit and recognition that they deserve. I just wish that we knew more about these ladies. I wish we could hear their story and all that they endured and what was going through their minds. And as to be expected, there are defenders of Sims, saying that he was a product of the time, slavery. It was the mid-1840s. I get it. Even though I'm a medical doctor, my major is actually in American history. I've done a lot of reading about this, so I get it. However, when your own white colleagues during this time are calling you out, saying that you're taking things too far on a slave in the 1840s, you might want to listen to them. So you guys feel free to leave a comment. Am I off base? If so, tell me why. I'd love to hear what you have to say.